Hello everyone, today you will hear an interesting story. I looked at my watch. It was 3 o'clock. It's about time to leave work. I pressed the selector button and called the secretary, Leda. I'm leaving, I said. If anything, the dean remains for me. I will be gone until Monday. You know, fishing doesn't tolerate any fuss. I want to be alone, I continued. Leda batted her eyelashes and smiled understandingly. Are you going alone? She asked. No, of course not. My wife and children will stay at home, especially since Rita was going to her dacha. Let her go. I understood Leda's hint perfectly. No, I do not have a mistress. Other women do not exist for me except for my wife. But every time my secretary made unambiguous hints, I ignored them. And now she couldn't help it, she bit me. Yuri, are you going far away? Leda asked. Far away? You'll see, you won't find me, I replied, laughing in anticipation of a long-awaited vacation. Leda looked at me with a strange expression, in which I could read hidden regret and pity. She turned and carefully closed the door behind her. On my way home, I stopped at a store and bought some hooks, a couple of spare reels of fishing line, and unable to resist, a splendid Finnish spinning rod. That's it, now I'm going home to change my clothes and then off I go, I thought to myself. As I walked to my car, I even started whistling a tune. The sun was shining, the day was fine, and my mood was great. When I arrived home, Rita was there. I quickly packed my things, including my fishing pole, and put on my jacket. As I headed for the door, I heard my wife's voice. And to say goodbye, she said. Of course, I replied, hugging and kissing her on the lips. She gently ran her hand over my cheek. Have a good rest, my love. Don't miss me too much. I'll be back soon. I looked at my wife and saw a tear rolling down her cheek. Maybe I'll forget about this fishing trip and stay home to spend the weekend with my family, I thought. But Rita reassured me, saying, no, don't worry about it. Everything will be all right. She kissed me on the lips one more time and reminded me to dress warmly in the morning, as it was freezing outside and I had a problem with my spine. She gently pushed me towards the door. I am lucky to have such a wonderful wife, I thought to myself as I left. We have been living together for almost 20 years, and our relationship is still like that of newlyweds. In that time, we have had 2 children, 2 daughters named Olia and Katya. After the birth of our youngest, Rita left her job and devoted herself to raising our children. I brought money into the family, but she is the one who truly makes our home a happy one. Into the family, especially since there was plenty to bring. I inherited from my father's quite large firm selling antiques. I expanded it, taking up jewelry, and over time I myself began to make jewelry, creating and selling imitations of works by famous masters. The business flourished and my family had enough money. I hired my cousin Vadim and after 6 months made him my deputy. He fit into the business so well that I was thinking of making him a part owner in the near future by transferring some of the shares. In general, all was well with me. Once or twice a year, we flew south with the family. I loved Rita very much and spared nothing for her as long as she was happy with me. Seeing her face with such a sweet and soft smile, I was ready to give my life for her. Rita responded in kind and I was bathed in her love. As time passed, the children grew up, and it seemed to me that my family's happiness would never end. At the exit from the city, I filled up and poured 2 cans of gasoline for the boat. In 10 minutes, I turned off the ring road onto the highway. It was the middle of October, and not quite autumn yet, but not winter either. The leaves on the trees were not entirely peeled off. They were hanging on by their fingertips in bright patches against the background of gray-green pine needles. But soon, the north wind would arrive, and these last reminders of summer would cover the streets and sidewalks in a bright, rustling carpet. I pulled up to a small pine-timbered house in the middle of the night. Once inside, I noticed that it was a little cooler inside than outside. I should light the fireplace and have a drink. I was in a great mood, in anticipation of tomorrow morning's fishing trip. In the small living room, I lit a fire. In the kitchen, after rummaging through an old cupboard, I found a previously unopened bottle of barley whiskey and a clean glass. It was getting darker, but I could still see the pines and the lakeshore from the kitchen window. A wind was rising over the lake, and the pines creaked and shook their tops in time with its gusts. When the gusts of wind died down, there was a strange silence. It was so quiet that one could hear the deep breathing of the lake. It was a beautiful place. I returned to the living room and went to a tape recorder on a small table and flicked the switch. From the speaker came the melody of my favorite song, sung by Chuck Berry. Women are bloodthirsty cats, but it's awfully boring without them, Chuck the prankster convinced me. I poured myself a nice glass of barley whiskey and sat down in the wicker chair in front of the fireplace. I wanted to sit and stare at the fire away from the hustle and bustle of everyday life. I was in no hurry. Listening to my favorite music, I felt like the happiest man on earth. The logs in the fireplace burned through and disintegrated into smoldering embers. By nightfall, the wind had increased, and it shook the shutters and windows. If I don't add wood, the fireplace will soon go out. I shuddered. I didn't feel like going out in this weather. But there was no way out. I'd have to fetch some firewood, which was stacked outside the boathouse. I put on my jacket, went outside, and carefully climbed down the steps made of wild stone to the shore. A strong wind had dispersed the small clouds, and the road was clearly visible in the moonlight. The wood was stacked neatly against the wall, under a canopy that was an extension of the roof. I had already placed the second log on the bent right arm when I heard a rustling sound behind me. I turned around quickly, but I had no time to dodge the blow to the head that stunned me. Something crunched in my skull, and a sharp pain pierced my whole body. Then the moonlit sky was blurring in front of my eyes, and I collapsed. I woke up from being dragged around by my armpits. "Did you kill him?" I recognized Rita's voice with surprise. "No, only stunned so far," said an unfamiliar smoky male voice. "You do not need to stay here. Take your car and go home. Remember, you weren't here. Everything will be all right." I heard the pebbles crunching under my feet. "Don't call me. I'll find you myself," the same voice said. I was picked up again under my arms. The man breathed heavily on the back of my neck. It was heavy. I figured he was talking about me. Suddenly it occurred to me he wants to kill me. But for some reason, I felt no fear. My reaction was completely instinctive. With a jerk, I twisted around and grabbed onto my opponent. He stumbled out of nowhere and collapsed on his back. I piled on top of him, trying to grab him by the throat, but the stranger came to his senses quickly and hit me on the head with his fist, right where I'd been hit. I cried out in pain, but my hands gripped his throat even harder. The man beneath me wheezed. With some incredible effort, he managed to throw his leg up and roll over me. We both rolled into the water. Falling down, my opponent had managed to be above me and was now trying to drown me. It was not very deep, and I rested my feet on the rocky bottom and then straightened up sharply. I hit him with my head on the chin. The stranger loosened his grip for a moment. I almost jumped out of the water and grabbed him by the throat again, getting over him. The adversary choked, trying to stick his head out of the water, but I pressed it down. I stood in the water, my hands clasping my assassin's throat. My clothes were wet and pulling me down. My opponent managed to push himself off the bottom for a moment. He took a gulp of air with his mouth wide open, but immediately lost his balance and disappeared under the water again. I put one foot on the piling of the boat dock, and the other on a large rock on the bottom. As hard as I could, I shoved the killer's head under the water, clutching his throat. I don't remember how long I stood like that, spitting up and gulping for air. The man didn't move anymore. I unclenched my fingers, and his flaccid body surfaced, rocking on the waves, and began to bang its head against the piling of the pier with a low thud. With difficulty, I managed to drag the body ashore. I searched his clothes, but found nothing. He didn't have a gun or any other weapon on him. Leaving the body by the water, I cautiously made my way to the boathouse. I snuck in from the side of the lake and slipped out the door. I did not switch on the light, of course. Well, it's here somewhere. I rummaged in the dark for a long time on the shelves until I found what I was looking for. Trying not to make any noise, I took a big metal jar from the shelf. He spent a long time picking at the tight-fitting lid with his fingernails. Eventually, after breaking a few fingernails, I managed to open it. I slipped my hand into the silica gel and fumbled with the neatly packed bundle. Thank God it was all there. I unwrapped the oiled paper and had a well-oiled TT pistol in my hands. The silencer and 2 magazines with ammunition were packed separately. I immediately put one in the grip and jerked the bolt. I took my time and attached the silencer. I clicked the safety and slipped the gun behind his belt. Well, time to see who was left in the house. I tried to straighten up, but I slipped on the stone steps and kicked my leg. The pain had a sobering effect on me. I caught a glimpse of the lake and cautiously made my way up the porch. The light was on in the house and the half-open door smelled warm. I peered cautiously into the living room. There was a strange man sitting in a wicker chair in front of the fireplace with a glass of whiskey. I leaned against the door jamb and must have given myself away. So was everything okay? The man didn't turn around, continuing to stare at the fire, apparently believing he had nothing to fear. "We'll have a drink and then we can go," he said. By the way, that whore and her boyfriend had already left. I decided to act without any formalities. "Hands on your head," I said calmly, almost affectionately. In surprise, the man jumped up from his chair, knocking over the whiskey bottle on the table, staring at me in a daze, with the gun pointed at him. "Hands behind your head, turn around," I continued in an icy tone. The gun in my hand looked very convincing, so the man obediently raised his hands and turned his back to me. I quickly stepped into the room and hit him on the back of the head with the pistol grip. Yes, the communist Mao Zedong was right 1,000 times over. The rifle gives birth to power. And even though I have a gun in my hand instead of a rifle, it doesn't change the essence of this expression. "Oh, Rita, you sneaky bitch," she shed a tear. I'm reminded of a Chuck Berry song, "Women are bloodthirsty cats, but it's awfully boring without them." Yeah, it couldn't be more boring. What did they do to me? I looked up and didn't see my heirloom baseball bat over the fireplace. How did I not get killed in the first place? 1,000 questions swirled around in my head. And the most important one, why? That Rita played a major role in this fun show? I had no doubt. But why, and most importantly, why? What pushed her to participate in the murder of her own husband, the father of her children? No sane woman, even if she hated her husband, would do such a thing. Clearly there was some very sweet enticement. A lover? Just because of a new love, a woman is willing to do anything, even murder. With a burning passion, she wouldn't hesitate to give up her old relationship for a new love, or more simply for a fresh fuck. When did she do that? Well, I'll think about that later. Especially since I haven't had the answers to these questions yet. I sat the flaccid body in a chair and taped his arms to the armrests. There was still whiskey at the bottom, and I took a sip straight from the neck. I looked at the stranger. His eyelids twitched a few times. He's awake, but he's pretending to be a hostage. I patted his cheeks with my gun. "Stop pretending. Where's Vasilich?" The man asked in a weak voice. "Your Vasilich has drowned," I openly mocked him. I dragged him to the shore so as not to prevent him from decomposing. I took another sip. "Did you kill him?" The uncle stubbornly tried to tear the scotch and made a beastly face at me. "No, I just drowned him," I chuckled drunkenly. "You're finished, you hear me?" "Finished." The man jerked his arms a few times, as if he wanted to tear off the armrests. "You'll never get out of here alive." I looked at the man wriggling in the chair, and I thought I saw foam coming out of his mouth and smoke coming out of his ass. But he was right. Apparently no one was gonna mess with me. Just shoot me. That's the best way out for them right now. "Now who is they?" I asked. "I guess it won't come to that, if you tell me everything." I stood up slowly. "Who do you think you are?" The stranger shook his hands again. "I've seen a lot in my time. That's one thing I was good at, but I was good at loosening tongues. Let's see if we can get started." I kicked the man in the teeth with the butt of my gun. He coughed and spat out some teeth with blood. I guess he won't be needing them anytime soon. "You're gonna die, you bastard." The man continued to swear with the same fervor as before, lisping ridiculously without his front teeth. It made me a little sad. He was acting like a little kid. I'll have to shoot him in the knee. After an hour and a half of grueling interrogation, I knew everything. Well, almost everything.